Howdy guys, and welcome to another IBM ODM technical tutorial. In this edition we're going to follow on from one of the previous videos, and we're going to talk about what it takes to test some rules. So let's imagine that we've offered some rules and we've unit tested them, and they seem to be okay. But before we want to put them into production, we really want to do a bit of a more rigorous test on them. So obviously we could run unit tests on each of the rules, manually entering each of the inputs and eyeballing each of the outputs to see if they make sense. However, we can do better than that, especially if we've got lots and lots of rules to test. So let's review the rules that we had. We had basically a benefits claim. And if the person had one child, then their benefit was $20.70. If they had additional children, 2 or more children, they got an extra $13.70 for each additional child. And if they had no children, they didn't get any child benefit at all. So those were the rules. This is what we came up with when we built a simple rule environment. Now we want to build a test framework in order to test this mechanism. So if we go to our Decision Center Business Console, if we flip over to our tests environment here, we can come over here and generate what's called a scenario file. Now a scenario file basically defines what is it we want to test. So I want to test the benefit equals a particular value, and we will generate all kinds of details in the output as well. So having clicked to generate this scenario file, if we click the download button, what is generated for us is an Excel spreadsheet. So if I copy this spreadsheet and put it in the directory in which I want to work, which is here, I now have an Excel spreadsheet which is ready for editing. Now I happen not to have Excel on my machine, so I'm going to use LibreOffice, but if you've got Excel, it's going to be the same thing. So I open up my spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet we see we have a table. And the table contains a bunch of scenarios that we want to test. And if we hover over this, this is where we enter the number of children. So for example, I might create a scenario called none, for no children, where the applicant has 0 children. Now let me add another row, insert a row above, and we will call this one child. One child, call it what I like. And we'll give that one child, and we'll create a few more rows. And we'll call it 2 children. And we'll say it's 2 children, and we'll say one more, 3 children. So these are the test scenarios that I want to run through the system. Now my rules were simple. The only input was the number of children. And this table will then eventually be executed against the rules. So when I run this, we will find that we fire each of the rules for each of these inputs. Now in my expected results worksheet over here, we also have a table, and this is where we enter mapping rows for each of the scenarios that I created in the input spreadsheet table or worksheet. So first one was called none, and then we had 1 child, and then 2 children, and then we had 3 children. And now I enter my expected results. So with 1 child, we don't expect any benefit whatsoever. And if we've got no children, no benefit, and 1 child, it would be $20.70. With 2 children, if my arithmetic is correct, it would be $34.40. And if 3 children, it would be $48.10. So what we've defined here is a spreadsheet where I've got my input scenarios. These are the number of children, and for each of these scenarios, the expected decision for the data. So now we have a spreadsheet here which contains rows for each of the possible inputs that I want to test with, and the expected results. So let me save this, save the spreadsheet, close the spreadsheet, and now let me go back to my testing environment. Here, close this window. Now go back to my main tests, and now I can import a what's the word I'm looking for? I can import a spreadsheet which I just built previously. So here I'm importing the data that I am interested in working with. Yes, all of this. I choose my directory which contains the spreadsheet file. I import my spreadsheet, the one that I manually edited after it was generated, and now I can save this. I've saved my testing scenario, so my test scenario is here. I can say I want to run that scenario, and now the ODM runtime is executing against that scenario. It comes back with a big status check mark saying everything ran successfully. If I drill into this report, we see we have 100% success. That's because the numbers were correct and the rules were good. And for each of these scenarios run, I can drill into it, make sure the expected result matches the actual result. I can look at the execution details, and of course the execution details contains the details of what actually ran. So if we look at the execution details for no children, we saw that no rules fired. Why did no rules fire? Because the two rules that were to execute, additional children and first child, they didn't match. We didn't have any children. Now if I look into one child, we should see, let me get my mouse right, there we go, and drill into one child, we see that the rules that fired, one rule fired, which was the first child rule, because we only had one children, but the additional children rule didn't fire. Why not? Because we didn't have any extra children. And finally, the two children rule, we should find that that caused both rules to fire. Nearly there we go, both rules to fire, and of course both rules fired. And we got 100% success. So if I was to now change my rules or change my logic or change other artifacts, I can now rerun this test at any time I want to and validate that the rules are executing as expected. So this allows a business user to describe through the auspices of a spreadsheet that looks like this, what the expected inputs are for any given scenario and what the expected results are. And then we can automate that in Decision Center through the Business Console to make sure that our implemented rules actually conform to that specification. And that's what I wanted to show you, my friends. I hope you found something useful in this, and I look forward to making more of these tutorials in the future. Thanks now, and bye-bye.